Hello and welcome everyone to Coach Connect Live. I'm thrilled to be here, really looking forward to our conversation today. I see that some of you are already letting us know where you're tuning in from. Please keep adding those into the chat. It's so wonderful. People from all over the country are joining us so far. So thank you for doing that. As we settle in and as you say hello in the chat, I'll introduce myself and introduce Coach Connect before we dive into our topic today. My name is Eloïse Eonnet. I am the director of Coach Connect at the Muse and Fairygodboss, and I'm also a career coach on our platform. For those of you who don't know, what is Coach Connect? Coach Connect is the place you can come. It's on the Muse. It's the place you can come to find a career coach to help you with taking the next step in your career. Whether you're really happy in your current position but want to take a next step within it, or you're thinking about a career change or actively in a job search, one of our career coaches can work with you one-on-one to help you strategize, prepare, organize, anything you might need to confidently take that next step. And once a month, I'm joined here by one of our fantastic coaches to talk about a subject that is helpful to you in your career at whatever stage you are at. And I am thrilled today to be joined by the one and only Yolanda Owens, who has been a super, super long-term coach at the Muse. She's been here for years and years, and she's a fabulous strategist and career advisor and has helped hundreds and hundreds of clients take that next step with confidence. So Yolanda, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and hello to everyone out there. It's great to see so many people from so many different places. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And today we're going to be talking about how to manage expectations in a changing job market, right? So how to kind of know what's out there and be successful in however you're navigating it. And it's such an important topic for anyone in their career to have a grasp on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we dive in, I'd love to give you a chance to introduce yourself to our audience. Can you tell us a little bit about you and about your coaching?
Sure. My name's Yolanda Owens. Of course, I'm a career coach with the Muse. I've been doing that for many years. Prior to that, I was a corporate recruiter for 20 plus years, and I'm also a published author, also writing about careers. So I guess you could say I'm a careers nerd. I love working with all types of clients. I have a sweet spot for young professionals, and I love working with career transitioners. And I just love helping people be successful in their job searches. So it's been great being able to translate what I've done as a recruiter now to the other side and helping, candidates to navigate roadblocks in their job searches.
Yeah, and you do it so well. I mean, time and time again, I see reviews and comments from your clients coming in, just saying such fabulous things about how you've helped them take those steps. So thank you for all the work that you do with them.
Thank you.
So quickly, one final thing before we jump into the topic, we're going to be taking time for questions today. So please, as you have questions come up, if anything you're curious about or want to learn more about, type it into the chat, and we're going to make sure to answer as many questions as we can today. So don't be shy, put those in there. But before we take those questions, Yolanda, let's jump in. So you wanted to talk to everyone today about how to manage expectations in a changing job market. Where would you like to start?
I'd like to start, what I call, before COVID, after COVID. Before COVID, yes, job searches were harried. But post-pandemic and post-COVID, they have been even more so. It seems like it's a full-time job just finding a job. And it was that way before, but it's like times 10 now. So, a lot of frustrations around how to navigate job searches, especially if you've been out of the job search for a while or haven't had a job search, pre-pandemic or post-pandemic. It can be a little daunting, just figuring things out. So there's been a change just in the way companies are doing business since the pandemic hit. Before the pandemic, there was more focus on long-term goals and things of that nature. Now what we're seeing are businesses have changed their structure. They're more focused on short-term wins, financial wins, and less on long-term competitiveness. And so that means that priorities are forever moving target. And that's really impacted job searches and how they've done workforce planning, how they've done hiring, and also on company culture. So it can be a really sticky thing to navigate if you haven't done that or you're in the midst of this, because job searches don't look the way they used to. And so there needs to be, a shift in how you're approaching your job searches. And so, how that's impacted the job searches is first that you are kind of seeing wonky things happening. There's not really like a trend in how jobs are being posted. You're seeing jobs being posted, and then maybe 3 weeks later, you're seeing them being taken down. And again, that's with that shifting of priorities. It could be a priority today, and then it could be on ice tomorrow.
Hmm.
And no way of knowing. And it could be up again 6 months from now. So again, the priorities are shifting. So again, seeing consistency in how job postings are being put up and being able to apply to them, that's an ever moving target. The other thing that we're seeing is a big surge in gig economy. Employers really aren't investing in their employees long term. So they're looking more contract, gig work, things of that nature to kind of offset. So they're really, employees are looked at more as cost to minimize than to invest nowadays. So again, you're seeing a lot with contract work and gig economy, which if you like that type of thing, it's great. And again, it is not any one industry that we're seeing. We're seeing these things, it's being industry agnostic. We're seeing it across the board. So whether you're tech or healthcare or finance or education, we're seeing these things across the board. And the other thing that we're seeing is a lot of ambiguous job postings.
Mm-hmm.
So job postings where you're like, not maybe really understanding what the job is asking, being very, very vague. And I think that's somewhat on purpose, just because priorities, again, are shifting so much. So what's priority today could be not priority tomorrow. And the job that you apply and get called for, once you get into the interview, could be a very different job once you start having a conversation. So again, things are moving quickly and rapidly, and it's really hard to navigate how you fit into the bigger scheme of things. So I think the biggest word of the day is to be flexible.
Yeah.
And to focus on what you can control. And that's really what I want to focus on in today's conversation. So I think the first thing that people need to do is to exercise radical acceptance. Radical acceptance that the job search doesn't look the way it did before, and you need to approach it differently. So when it comes to looking at job descriptions and when it comes to, formatting your resumes and things of that nature, what does that look like? In terms of looking at job descriptions, again, they could be vague and ambiguous, and it could be a moving target. So what I like to suggest people do is to employ what I call a 60-20-20 rule. And what I mean by that is that when you're looking at a job description, you should feel comfortable doing at least 60% of what the job is asking you to do. There should be another 20% where there's going to be a short learning curve of maybe a couple of months. And then there should be another 20% where there's going to be brand new learnings.
Mm-hmm.
I say that is if you go into a job doing 100% of what it's asking you to do, you're going to cap out and you're going to be bored in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to give yourself some wiggle room to grow and develop into the position, not only from a skill standpoint, but also financially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so by employing that 60-20-20 rule, you'll be able to do that. And it's also going to make sure that you're not disqualifying your job because of, having some inferiority complex.
Right. Yeah. And I assume also, given that these job listings are ambiguous, which leads us to believe that the hiring managers also aren't quite sure exactly what it's going to look like. This approach is really nice because it gives you that flexibility and that opportunity to learn what the job is going to be once you've applied.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like I said, you don't disqualify for yourself for something that you could be a great fit for.
Yeah.
So again, looking at the job descriptions with a new lens will really help you be able to focus a little bit more and hopefully relieve some of the anxiety when you start looking at these job descriptions.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to your resume, I know there's a lot of advice out there that, you need to write a new resume or change your resume for every job that you're applying to. I don't necessarily agree with that because your experience doesn't change that much at the end of the day. And with the positions and the job descriptions being a moving target, If you leave something out, you might, lend yourself to being, kicked out of consideration. So, your best bet is to have two resumes. One resume that you're using to apply, and then another resume that's kind of like a running rap sheet of everything that you've done since like your third grade spelling bee. That way you're always keeping current, and instead of writing a new resume, you can copy and paste from that second document that has everything and add and delete where you need to. That's a little better use of your time than, again, formatting a new resume for every job that you're applying. That's exhausting. And again, your experience isn't going to change that drastically at the end of the day. So you're better of giving a great snapshot view of your accomplishments, not so much your daily duties, but your accomplishments, the things that you've done in the role that moved the needle, made the job better than when you started in it. Because those are the conversations that employers are going to want to have with you. So if you give that as room for conversation, then you're going to be great. And then just also in terms of that radical acceptance, knowing that the job search is probably going to take you a little longer than it has before.
Yeah.
Again, a lot more hoops and hurdles to jump through with the way job searches are set up now. So giving yourself a little more time and space. I read a statistic that said the other day that job searchers are taking anywhere between 6 and 9 months on average right now. So again, giving yourself some time and space and knowing that there are a lot of things outside of your control. So again, focusing on those things that you can control and then let everything else fall into place. The other thing that you want to do is you want to kind of recalibrate your self-awareness. Now that you know that the landscape has changed and you know what employers are looking for or not looking for, or you have no idea, again, focusing on what you control. So kind of recalibrating your self-awareness, knowing that companies aren't really focusing on your happiness as an employee and focusing more on these moving targets of priorities. How do you fit into that, and how does that work for you in terms of work-life balance and in terms of the type of culture that you're going to be seeking out? So taking restock and re-inventory of what you want, what you don't want, and what you're willing to compromise in your job searches. Taking a second look at that with a different lens. Now that you know that that landscape's changed, what mattered before isn't going to matter now. So your priorities have to change in terms of the types of employers and the type of work and environment that you're willing to settle for moving forward. So that's going to be really key for you as well in finding happiness. And then the next thing is going to be shifting your narrative. If you're making a career transition, I think it's an exciting time because you've kind of got a blank slate. You get to reinvent yourself now in a new market. So what do you want, the 2.0 version of you to look like? You've got a blank slate to play with. It doesn't have to look like it did before. And when writing that narrative for your resume or anything that you're doing in terms of branding yourself, you want to focus on where you want the employer to see you. So if you're making a career transition and, you were a lawyer and now you want to be an underwater basket weaver, you kind of want to sweep that lawyer stuff aside and talk about what's going to make you a great underwater basket weaver, because otherwise you're going to continue to get contacted for those lawyer positions. So rewrite your narrative where you want to be seen. If that means that you don't work with a reverse chronological order resume, which is we all tend to default to. We learned that when we were in college and no one teaches us otherwise afterwards. But writing more of a functional resume where you focus on your relevant experience, regardless of where it falls on your career trajectory. That way it tells a story and there's no room for misinterpretation. And then, finally, kind of diversifying your efforts in your job search. It's not going to be enough anymore just to apply to the job boards. I equate job boards nowadays to being like the lost sock in the dryer. Certain if it's really going to make it where it needs to. And, with all the hoops that you need to jump through with AI and applicant tracking systems and key search words, it can really muddy the waters and, again, make it more complicated than it needs to be. So you need to do a few things. You need to put a little bit more elbow grease in there, get out there and do some networking. And, for all my fellow introverts out there, I know that sounds like having a root canal. But it's a necessary evil to get out there and network. You need to shake some hands, kiss some babies, make sure that you're networking with people who are in the field. And I would say take the networking approach, not so much from a job seeker's lens, but from an information gathering lens. Asking for people for their perspective on what's going on in the industry, in the field, things of that nature, treating them as a subject matter expert. So you look more inquisitive than opportunistic. And that'll really help you get more responses to your networking requests and things of that nature. But as my grandmother used to say, you can't catch a fish unless it opens its mouth. So you need to let people know that you're looking for opportunities and to be specific about what it is that you're looking for. Because if you tell someone that you're looking for just anything, that doesn't help them. You need to give them write your narrative where you want to be seen. Speak your narrative where you want to be seen so help can come from the right places. And, don't be afraid to employ things like search firms. Again, contract work is hot and heavy right now. So if that means you take a contract position until you find your next permanent role, that's going to give you some exposure that could lead to a full-time position, or at least put you in a circle where you can talk to people where you can, again, get that exposure. Do some volunteer work. That's a great way to get some exposure as well. And those are all things that you can put on your resume. Volunteer work, just because you're not getting paid for it, doesn't mean that it doesn't count as experience. So don't be afraid to put those things on a resume. I had a client a few weeks ago who has been developing this website for someone an organization for 5 years for free as a volunteer. And, he's looking to be a web developer. I'm like, well, why aren't you putting that experience on your resume?
On your resume. Yeah.
It's real experience. So make sure that you're putting that on the resume, because it counts. And a paycheck doesn't negate it as experience. And then the last thing is making sure you have some healthy distractions when you're going through your job search. Job searches can be very self-deprecating and exhausting, and it can really take a chink out of your confidence armor. So I tell anyone who's going into a job search, whether you're in a role that you're looking to ditch, or you've been displaced and you're looking for something new, find a healthy distraction. You can really start ruminating and getting inside your own head and being your own worst enemy. So apply for a couple of jobs, and then it's the waiting game. And then that's when all the devil and the angel appears on your shoulder, and you don't need that. So find some healthy distractions. The things that you've had on your bucket list that you haven't done in a while or have been looking to do, this is a great time to do those things. And if it's scheduled, even better. That way, every Wednesday at 4:00, you have something to look forward to. It makes the days go by a little faster, and it gives you something to look forward to. And it keeps your mind off the job search and who you're not hearing from or who you are hearing from.
Totally. And also when you're networking and you're talking to people, it gives you something to talk about. What have you been up to? Right? It's like, I'm not just job searching. I'm also doing these other things. I'm a full human. I think that's also really, really key. Yeah.
So that's really, really important to keeping your sanity, not feeling that you're isolated in your job search, and also having some control. There's so many elements in the job search that you don't have control over. You need something that you can control so you have a sense of purpose. So that healthy distraction is going to feed that need.
Yeah. I mean, Yolanda, you've touched upon so many amazing things already for our audience. The how you're seeing the job market shift, what the priorities are for businesses and companies right now, which is so important for job seekers to keep in mind, and then so many different things that people can be doing. I'm seeing a bunch of questions coming in. Let's get through a few here. Yeah. There's one Alexandra says, and there are several questions that are similar to this, and you've also touched upon some things that perhaps you could reiterate or go deeper. Alexandra says, been a longish time since my layoff, and feels like so much has shifted, especially in the last year. Comparing my skill set with current recs is just apples and oranges. Even if I try to target roles at a lower level than the lowish level I was at previously. Hard to feel qualified for anything anymore. So the question in here, I think is kind of like, how do I take that next step when I am languishing in this job search, when I am having trouble getting those skill sets across and actually making headway?
Yeah. I don't know that you necessarily need to lower your standards in a situation like that. If you're making a transition, you don't need to start off in the mailroom. You're going to have a lot of transferable skills. So, maybe reassessing what those transferable skills are when you're looking at the job descriptions, kind of seeing what the trends are and things that they're looking for and how you're portraying that in your resume. What happens a lot of times, I do a lot of resume writing, and people will tell me all these great things that they're doing, and we'll have these great conversations. I'll be like, well, where is this in your resume? This is fabulous, but it's not in the resume. So again, not focusing so much on the daily duties that you do, but those things, again, those accomplishments, those things that you do that move the needle, those things that people ask you for help with, those projects that you're really proud of. The way that you've added value in your companies, kind of taking stock of that, and that needs to be your narrative. Because if you're only relying on those daily duties, yes, you're going to be bypassed. They need to see something that's quantifiable. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean stats and statistics. It means how you added value and how you made the job better than when you started it.
Yeah. And jumping off of this, April is asking, can you repeat the 20-20% rule,
Oh,
please?
yeah.
So you're 90-20-20, yeah, 80-20-20, yeah.
20-20.
Yeah.
So 60% that you're comfortable with, 20% learning curve, and 20% new learnings.
Yeah, nice. And similar to that, somebody else asked about the two resumes. So that first resume, the one that you're really sending off, should it be shorter than the long resume that you keep with all of your experience?
Yes, it should definitely be shorter. You don't want the laundry list of everything you've done for the last 35 years.
Yeah.
The last 10 years, or again, what's relevant across your career trajectory is what you should be, focusing on. If it's too far back, don't worry about putting the dates on it. It's really more important that you have the narrative of what the experience was, not so much when it happened on the timeline of your work experience.
Yeah. And Sarah asks, do you find that employers are approaching recruiting that way too, the 60-20-20? She says, in the current state, it feels like they're not leaving any room for people to apply for growth opportunities. And it's true. I've heard people say this to me as well. What would you advise to someone who's thinking about this?
Yeah, I would agree. That's probably employers aren't looking at it from that lens. But again, you have to think for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, you fake it till you make it.
Mm-hmm.
You fake it till you make it. And
Yep.
again, looking at it from that lens and with priorities, again, with all those shifting priorities, what's relevant today is going to be irrelevant tomorrow. So while employers may be sticking hard and fast to that, once you get into the job, it's going to be a lot of fluctuation. So that 60-20-20 is still going to apply, whether or not it's in the job description and employers are looking at it from that lens or not. That's the reality of the situation.
Yeah. And I wonder too, based on that, if they're looking just for someone who has the core skill sets and then a good culture fit, because if that person has core skill sets and a good culture fit and the ability to learn in the future, then they're going to be more flexible once they're internal within the organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
yeah, nice. Great. Thank you. Let me see what else we have here. April asks, does the insight that you shared on businesses focused on short-term financial wins versus long-term gain seem to pop up in more in certain industries than others?
I would say no. I am seeing it across the board.
Yeah,
Again,
me too.
really industry agnostic at this point. So it doesn't matter, like I said, whether it's education or healthcare or tech or finance. I'm seeing it all over the place.
Yeah. And so, given that, would you recommend someone who really needs to land a job, right? If I've been in a job search for a long time, I'm starting to need that income again, I'm starting to need that health insurance again, right? Would you say it would be a good tactic to kind of say, great, I'm actually going to go to consulting or to, part-time, or how would you say, if I really need to land that position, how should I adapt my search, even if it's also short term? And then I start looking for that longer term job later on.
Yeah. Looking for short-term opportunities. And again, if that means taking a step down or doing some consulting work or what have you, again, recalibrating what that narrative needs to look like. So knowing that this is going to be a short-term assignment or a short-term project, taking a look at your resume and making sure that it fits that narrative. Yes, of course, because we all have ego when we go into these things, thinking that, we want them to know everything and love everything about us. But you have to be strategic about how you're presenting yourself and knowing your audience. So understanding your audience, what they're looking for, and then writing your narrative to fit that.
Yeah.
Necessarily a one size fits all. And I know we talked about not having multiple resumes, but in a case like this, you are going to need to have a separate resume that is going to speak to something that's a bit more short term, and it's going to speak to what you're going to be able to lend to that particular role or industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And Randy's asking, the accomplishment-based resume isn't easy for those of us that fight self-imposed imposter syndrome. And then she laughs out loud. Thoughts on how to get past that?
Get a coach.
I was going to say, work with Yolanda.
Yes, work with the coach. Because again, think of coaching as like therapy for your career. Sometimes it's really beneficial just to be able to talk those things out. Talk with someone who doesn't know you from a can of paint, that can give you some insights and perspectives that you haven't thought of, and help you get outside your head and maybe give you some thoughts and ideas. They may not necessarily, you may not necessarily have them write it for you, but at least give you some ideas and some tips and some things of that nature that you haven't thought of, that could help you get out of your head and give you some perspective.
Yeah. I think being in conversation with an expert can only help in that situation and really kind of open those doors to take those next steps for sure. Yeah, absolutely. A few more questions before we close. Gail asks, do cover letters help? I've had a few recruiters tell me that no one reads them anymore.
I was one of those recruiters who hated written cover letters. I am not a huge fan of cover letters. I say cover letters are necessary if maybe you're making a drastic career change. Like going back to the example of the lawyer and the underwater basket weaver, you may need to make some justifications there, and a cover letter may be able to help tell that narrative a little better than just a plain resume. So it could help in that instance. I also find in marketing communications, if you're doing a lot of writing, they may require a cover letter just so they get a sense for your writing style. Bring an introduction to how you write. So in those two instances, I say a cover letter can help. Outside of that, unless you really need to plead your case, I think you're safe applying without one. If it doesn't explicitly ask, you shouldn't have to bother with that.
That's great advice.
Yeah, spend your time doing something more productive.
Or go do that activity that gives you energy during your job search, right? Yeah. Which is where I'd love to end. Another question that came in is, how can I feel less lonely in this process? It's incredibly a lonely experience. Do you have any advice or any words of wisdom to share with people who might be feeling lonely in this experience?
Yeah, volunteer to do something. It's always great to go help someone else when you are feeling deficient. Gives you some great perspective, and again, it keeps you from ruminating in your head. It can be very lonely. So if you're volunteering to do something, I don't care if you're volunteering to babysit your next door neighbor's kid. It doesn't matter. Finding something, again, that healthy distraction to help detach from yourself and put your focus and your thoughts somewhere else is always going to be helpful.
Yeah. Create value in the moment for yourself. Yeah, I love it. Well, Yolanda, thank you so much. You've given us so much perspective on, your expertise, seeing what's happening in the job market. I think that gives a lot of even just direction and a little sense of ease to job seekers today who might feel like, why is nothing working, or why are all the targets that I thought existed not there where I thought they would be? So that's been incredibly helpful. And all the things that you've listed, that you've walked us through to help people really take those steps. So thank you so much for your expertise, for answering these questions. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today, and for the questions that you asked in the chat, and for supporting each other. We will be back next month with another conversation. So again, Yolanda, thank you so much, and we will see you all next month.